Hey guys, I hope you're having a good summer. I'm having a good summer so far here in Nauvoo, Illinois. I wanted to make this video for you because before I left for Nauvoo, I promised you that in 50 days after Easter, I would finish a story I had started, which is the story of what happened 50 days after the first Easter, 50 days after Jesus came back from the dead. So here is the rest of that story. So we talked about the fact that Jesus died. He was killed on a cross, and then he was buried in a cave, a tomb. And then 3 days later, his disciples went back to the cave and found that Jesus wasn't there anymore because Jesus had risen from the dead. And then Jesus began to appear to them at different times and different places. So one of the last times Jesus appeared to his disciples, he took them out of the city where they were staying, which was Jerusalem. That's the city there in the corner where I'm pointing. It has a big wall around it, and there are big buildings inside it. They left the city, and they climbed to the top of a mountain nearby. And Jesus told his disciples that he was going to leave them and that it was now their responsibility to go out into all of the world and to teach people the same things Jesus had taught them and to invite people to join them in carrying out Jesus' mission. But, Jesus said, they shouldn't go out yet. They needed to wait until God sent them power from heaven. And after Jesus said that, as his disciples were watching, he then rose up into the sky, just flew up into the sky, and disappeared. So his disciples went back to the city of Jerusalem, and they waited for whatever was going to happen to give them power from heaven. And they didn't know what that was going to be. But they stayed in the city and they waited for something to happen. And they waited 50 days from the time that Jesus rose from the dead. And this is why before I left for the summer, I was having you guys count down on a little calendar like this one, counting down from day 1 all the way down to day 50. So, 50 days after Jesus rose from the dead, it was a holiday in the city of Jerusalem. The holiday was called Shavuot. It was a big holiday, and people would come to Jerusalem from all over, including other countries. I have a picture of them here. So you see the city there with its wall around it, and it's got gates. And out of the gates, you can see roads, and people are coming in on the roads, and they're going into the city. It was maybe kind of like Mardi Gras. I know that the Patels have been to New Orleans for Mardi Gras, which is a big holiday in that city. And people come from lots of places, including other countries, to celebrate Mardi Gras. Shavuot was kind of like that. And so people would come from all over to the city of Jerusalem to celebrate Shavuot. Now, Jesus' disciples were still in Jerusalem, waiting to get power from heaven. And they were celebrating Shavuot too. So they had gotten together in somebody's house, and they were there. I'm not sure what they were doing to celebrate, but they were celebrating the holiday. And then all of a sudden, as they were celebrating, something happened. Something very strange. They heard a sound. The story says that the sound was like the sound that a wind makes. So I'm guessing it would be something like a very strong wind. Except they could hear a wind, but there wasn't actually a wind. It sounded like there was a big wind in the house, but nothing was actually blowing around. They couldn't feel a wind. They could just hear it. And then, all of a sudden, the story says, inside the house, they saw something that looked like fire. But it wasn't actually fire. Just like they could hear a wind, but it wasn't actually a wind, they could see what looked like fire, But it wasn't actually fire, and they knew it wasn't fire because it wasn't burning anything up the way a fire would do, but it looked like fire. And as they watched, that fire split up into separate flames, and a flame stood over the head of every disciple in the house. And when that flame stood over their head, all of a sudden, they felt filled with power. And suddenly they found that they had the ability to speak other languages, languages that they had never studied or learned. This was the Holy Spirit. God had sent the Holy Spirit from heaven to be with Jesus' disciples and to give them power to go out and do Jesus' work. And so once the disciples had received the Holy Spirit, they left the house and they went out into the streets and they began talking with the people they met there about Jesus. And the Spirit had given them this power to speak other languages. So they were able to speak with people who had come to Jerusalem from all kinds of other countries because they could speak their language, thanks to the power the Spirit gave them. And so they talked in different languages with lots of people about Jesus. And some people were interested in what they had to say. And they became part of the disciples' community. And they helped the disciples carry out Jesus' mission. That story is what we're remembering today in church. The day on which we remember this story is called the Day of Pentecost. Remember I said that the holiday that people were celebrating was called Shavuot? Another word for Shavuot is Pentecost. It literally means 50 days. So we celebrate this holiday today, every year, 50 days after Easter. And on this day, we remember the story about how the Holy Spirit came down on Jesus' disciples to give them power from heaven. Some people have the tradition of wearing red on this day. You can see I have a red shirt here. I like to wear red on Pentecost to remind me of, in the story, how the Spirit appeared looking like a fire is red. So I like to wear red on this day. Now, the story is important to our community because when the Holy Spirit came to the disciples on the day of Pentecost, it never went away. It's still here on earth. And every person who becomes a disciple of Jesus receives the Holy Spirit. We don't see it and hear it the way that Jesus' first disciples did. When we receive the Spirit, we don't hear the noise of a wind, and we don't see something like fire over our heads. But when we become disciples of Jesus, the Holy Spirit comes to be with us. And even though we can't see it, it gives us power and helps us know what to say and what to do as we are carrying out Jesus' mission. When Lila was baptized, you might remember that after she was baptized in the water, she then sat in a chair. And some of the grown-ups put their hands on Lila's head and said a prayer over her. When Jade gets baptized, the same thing will happen to her. After she gets baptized in the water, she'll sit in a chair, and some of the grown-ups will put their hands on Jade's head, and they'll pray over her. This is called confirmation. And when you get confirmed, it's to remind you that now that you've been baptized and have promised to be a disciple of Jesus, you have the Holy Spirit with you. You won't see it, and you won't hear it, but it's there. And that's why we do confirmation. Since you can't see the Spirit and hear the Spirit, confirmation is a way to remind you that the Spirit is with you. And it will give you power as you go out all your life helping to carry out Jesus' mission. That is the story of the Day of Pentecost. That's the story we're celebrating today in church. I hope you guys have a good time, and I hope you have a good summer, and I'll try to send you another video sometime later. Bye-bye.